All right, this video is about creating the sweep feature. So with the sweep feature, we need to have two sketches instead of one now. Okay, one sketch is for the path, the other sketch is for the profile. Okay, and then the profile gets swept along a specific path. So in order to accomplish this, we're going to start on a horizontal plane to make it pretty easy to understand. So I'm going to use the top plane, left click, start a new sketch. Okay. We're going to use the circle tool to throw a circle in there. And of course, I always forget to do this. I have to go back into my custom and change to inch, pound, seconds, which will kick me out. I then have to go back into my sketch, edit sketch, and now I can dimension it with the proper units. And we'll make this quarter inch, 0.25. Okay. So I've got it constrained to the center. Quarter inch diameter circle. I'm going to exit sketch. Okay. After I exit the sketch, I then have to start a sketch on a perpendicular plane to the top plane. All right. So if I'm going to show my current plane. Okay. So you see exactly where it is. I need to either draw on the front or the right plane. Both of those are perpendicular to this plane. So I'll use the front plane, create a new sketch. All right, and you can see kind of where that plane sits. And I'm going to hit the space bar and normal to the front plane by clicking on the front. Okay, now this green red line is basically the top plane, which I'm now going to hide. All right, so the only thing that I see now is a flat line, which is representative of the circle. Okay, that circle now looks like a flat line because we're looking at its side. Okay, so I'm going to use the line tool and start at the origin and travel up and over, zoom out a little bit, over, and up, and hit escape once. Okay, so the thing to keep in mind as that profile is going to be swept across this path, I have to keep in mind that the profile itself, all right, as it turns this corner, it has to have enough room to make the corner turn, extend some more, and then make the next turn. All right, so I'm not going to use my smart dimensions. I'm just going to left click, hold down, and pull away. And I'm just going to resize this by clicking and dragging on some of the points or some of the lines. Okay, right now I don't care about dimensions too much. In this case, I will be using the sketch fillet feature. So I'm going to click on sketch fillet and I'm going to select all of these, not lines, but I will select corner points. Corner points, corner point, corner point, and we'll change the fillet radius to, let's do 0.30. Okay, so that should give us enough room to make the turn and go across the whole path. I'm going to green check. Okay, and then green check again to get out of the sketch fillet tool. I'm still in sketch. Okay, if you want to dimension this, you can dimension this. However, I'm going to exit the sketch. I'm going to do it up here this time just to be different. And if I orbit this, you can sort of see the relationship between the two sketches. Okay, so I've got my circle or my profile down below, and I've got my path. My sketch 2 is currently selected, so it's going to recognize this as the path automatically. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the swept boss base. And like I said, it recognizes, I've got two fields here. It recognizes the path field, that's sketch 2. The profile field is highlighted in blue, so that means it's looking for a profile. All right, again, I can left click on this sketch directly in my workspace, or I can drop down my feature management tree and pick sketch 1. And as soon as I do that, it takes my profile and moves it along the path and shows me a preview of my object. Green check. And I just swept that profile around my path. Okay, if you want to try to make certain things that are, maybe it has some negative space. Okay, maybe if it has some negative space, I'm going to hit the little drop down button for sweep 1, and you can see that it absorbed sketch 1 and sketch 2. So I'm going to look under sketch 1 and edit sketch. Okay, with this edit sketch feature now, I'm going to create a single island. Start at the center and put another circle there. That second circle is going to create a hole. If I exit sketch, you'll notice that now it recognized that single sketch, just like it normally would, a positive feature and a negative feature. So it basically took sketch 2, which I just remodified, and created a hole in it. Okay, how do I know that it goes all the way through? I mean, I can see through the top. I can see through the bottom. All right, the other thing you can do is you can change your visibility. All right, you can change this to hidden lines. All right, we should all know about hidden lines and what hidden lines look like and why they look the way they do. So I can see that there is a wall all the way through. I can change to wireframe. Go back to my solid. Another thing that I can do to make sure that there's definitely a hole here, up in the workspace area, there's something called a section view. This has nothing to do with your annotations when you create a detail drawing. This is simply to help you see inside of your part that you're modeling. So if you click on section view, in your properties, you have 3 distinct possibilities based on your right plane, your top plane, or your front plane, right? And then, of course, you can move those planes to see inside certain areas. Okay, so you can kind of click on an appropriate plane, move and rotate. I think this is the best one, using the front plane because it cuts directly through at the front plane. I'm going to green check, and I see my section view. This is a live section view. Okay. When I'm done looking at my section view, I go back up to the top to the heads up display, and I click or turn off the section view. And then I see my full part again. So it's a nice little trick to help you see what you need to see. Very helpful in assemblies when you're putting multiple parts together and you have one piece fitting inside of another piece. Then you can make sure that everything fits appropriately. Okay. Another way to create sweeps and use multiple sketches. I'll show you how to use, let's see, I'm going to start a new part. And this is going to show you how to use a spring or use the sweep feature to create a spring. Okay. So the first thing you need to do is to create a diameter. So I'm going to go to the top plane. Okay. And I'm going to use the circle tool. I do this every time. Changing my units to IPS. It kicks me out. I go back in. There we go. I'm going to dimension this diameter. This diameter is going to be the center line of a cylinder. Okay, so if you think about like the edge of a cylinder and that cylinder has a wall thickness, this circle becomes the center or the midpoint of that wall thickness on a cylinder. Okay, so let's say I have a 1.5 inch diameter spring. I'm going to exit my sketch. Okay. And then in order to do this, I need to go to curves. So curves is under the feature ribbon, feature tab. And I'm going to go to curves and select helix and spiral. Okay. When I select helix and spiral, it didn't recognize that any sketch was selected. So this yellow box is basically telling me, hey, make sure that you select a sketch so I know what to work with. So I'm going to select the circle, left click. Okay, so now what we get is some dynamic information right here on the screen, or I can use the same information here in the properties on the left-hand side. So I can define this particular spiral or helix based on the definition: pitch and revolution, height and revolution, height and pitch, and spiral. If I pick spiral, that means it's going to be two-dimensional. It'll be flat. Okay? Spirals are flat. They are two-dimensional. All the other choices are three-dimensional. Okay? So height and revolution. That's a good one. So I'm going to change it to height and revolution. I'm going to have constant pitch. My height for the top of this, let's say, is 3.00 inches. And from the base to the top, how many revolutions, in other words, how many times does my start point go around? Okay, so I'm going to increase this. It increases it by 1/4 inches. So you can sort of see what happens to the amount of revolutions and what's happening with the helix and where I can stop it. I'm going to green check. Okay, I stopped at 11.5 revolutions. So within a 3-inch height, I have 11.5 revolutions. Now this is just a sketch. Okay, so this is now a helical path from which I have to create a profile sketch. Right? Now, looking at all of my planes, right? If this is an endpoint for the helix, and this is an endpoint for the helix, I don't really have anything that is perpendicular to the plane. Okay? This endpoint is hanging out in midair. This endpoint is hanging out in midair. There is nothing perpendicular. Okay, so I have to create a perpendicular plane. I'm going to hide all of these planes. I don't need to see them right now. So the way I do that is by using reference geometry. Okay, this is only one of the ways to use reference geometry. So under the Features tab in the ribbon, next to Curves, I have Reference Geometry. I'm going to drop down the options for Reference Geometry and select Plane, because that's what I want to create. Without anything being selected, it's giving me up to 3 different references that I can choose. Okay, for this, I need to choose 2 references. The first reference will be the helix itself. So I'm going to click on the helix. Okay, and by default, it places a reference plane in some random spot on that edge. Then it automatically moves and highlights my second reference. Okay. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the endpoint of the helix. Okay. Not the helix, but the endpoint of the helix. I see that orange dot, and I'm going to left click. And that basically gives me a plane that is perpendicular to that endpoint. Okay. Third reference. I don't need any. I have the information that I need. So I'm just going to go ahead and green check. And I've created a plane that is now perpendicular to that endpoint. So how do I start a sketch on this plane? Just like you do with your other planes. You can left click here, or you can left click on plane 1 in the feature management tree. Left click, new sketch. I'm going to take my circle tool. Okay, I think this is a little bit off. Okay, so right now it's not really coincident. If I use my space bar, I have to get out of my circle tool. If I use space bar and normal 2, now I'm directly head on. Will it allow me to tag the center? So it doesn't want to give me a center point. Okay? So in this case, I have to use relations, display delete relations. Go into the drop down box and add a relation between the center point. I'm going to delete arc 1. I want the center point and the end of that arc. And I need a pierce relation. It needs to pierce so that they coincide with one another. Green check. Smart dimension to make sure that I have enough space to go around. I'm going to make this 0.1. Exit sketch. Okay. Now that I've got this information, I've got my profile, I've got my path. Now I use the sweep boss base. It recognizes my profile. It wants me to click, because this is highlighted in blue, the profile, excuse me, the path. I click the path. And it creates my sweep for me. This is how you're going to make your springs, if you need to make springs. Okay. So this is a little bit more involved because now you're bringing in extra information. Okay. What you end up with is a spring. Also, you have this blue helix. All right. I don't know if you can see the blue line in there. Okay. That is the blue helix line. And you also have the plane that's lit up. You'll notice that these things are colored in the feature management tree. Okay, so to hide the plane, you're going to left click on plane and go to the hide symbol. That gets rid of that. To hide the helix, you're going to do the same thing. Left click on the helix, click on the hide button, and now you're left with just the simulated material. Okay, so that's how you can create springs. You can play around with some of the other features to create a variable spring. So maybe it tapers in, it tapers out. Explore and experiment a little bit. But that is basically using the sweep feature. So it's somewhat similar to the revolve. And obviously, yes, you can do a swept cut. So if you have something like a very specific groove, for instance, in your pinball machine, you can do a sweep cut and make a groove follow a very specific path. Okay, so that is using sweep boss base or swept boss base, and then also creating a spring using the helix and curve feature.